Hi, and welcome to another FND presentation. Today, we're going to be discussing the transition IEP and moving forward. So, welcome. I'm glad that you're here today. My name is Sassafrass Mittlemen, and I am one of the parent trainers here at the Family Network on Disabilities. So, a little bit about us. We are a nonprofit. We're a 501c3. We do not work with the local, the government, the state government, federal agencies, or the schools. Instead, we are funded by the U.S. Department of Education and the U.S. Department of Health under IDEA. So, IDEA Part D says that every state has to have parent training and information centers where parents can go to get the information that they need. And so that is FND. We are able to provide these services through our grants to no cost to our families. We are family driven, we're family centered. We were founded by parents who had children with disabilities and needed information, needed supports, needed strategies. And so out of that, it's a very grassroots network. The FND family was born, and we are still an agency and an organization of parents and individuals with disabilities, because we're able to understand, a little bit better having walked through these paths ourselves. We do not act as attorneys, doctors, or mental health professionals, but we give you information, supports, resources. This is direct, super vetted information. It's being vetted by the Florida Department of Education. We work with BEES, the Bureau of Exceptional Student Services. We work with the Office of Special Education Programs. So, and we're getting this information up to date and we're keeping it current. Whenever something's coming down the Florida pike legislatively, we're keeping track. So we're making sure that you're getting that information that you need and you're understanding the processes by which you would use that information. If you're confused about what kind of meeting you're having, you need some resources about a particular type of instance. If you need ideas for accommodations, modifications, if you have placement questions, and anything and everything in between, that's what we are here for. So this is indicator 13. It is hard to read, but you will note that at the bottom there is a website, and you can go to that website and actually get a fully legible copy of this. We're just going to sum this up. So the United States Department of Education's the Office of Special Education Program requires, and this is under IDEA, it requires that all of 50 states submit data annually to show that they're hitting different indicators. So these are different things that have to be provided for students with special needs. So um, this is part of what we call the state performance plan, and indicator 13 is all about post-secondary goals. So what are we transitioning to? Whatever life looks like for your student after age 18 or 22, depending on when they graduate. So when we're looking at indicator 13, the types of things that the schools are accountable for is, are there measurable? That's important. Make sure our goals are SMART, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timed. But are there measurable post-secondary goals? These have to be in the areas of training, education, employment assistance, and if necessary and needed, independent living skills. So you see, this is not just core academics. We're talking about what that child is going to need going forward to be functional. So don't just get hung up on the academic side. Are there post-secondary goals that are updated annually? Is there any evidence that those were based on age-appropriate transition assessments? Are there any transition services in the IEP that's going to enable that child to meet their post-secondary goals or needs? Do they include courses of study that will enable them to meet those goals? Are there annual IEP goals that are related to that transition need? And was that student actually invited to participate in the IEP where any of these transition services were being discussed? So that is something that the federal government, under the Office of Special Education Programs, who are in charge of administrating the National Special Education Law, the IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. They fund this act. They make sure that they provide all the provisions, lay out all of the specific rules on how things are supposed to flow. And then, they fund organizations like us that assist the schools or that assist parents in our case. And so they're also looking for that accountability and making sure that that money being administered is being used in the ways that it's supposed to be used. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about indicators. And those are the indicators for 13, which is again post-secondary goals. So transition age. So in IDEA 2004, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or as we lovingly create the acronym IDEA, that shows that all students have to have transitional services. So IDEA is the national special education law. Nothing that any state can do legislatively, or their Department of Education, or their school districts, or individual schools, none of them can do anything that supersedes that. So if they say that this has to be done this way in the IDEA, it has to be done that way. They are all accountable to this federal law. So what IDEA says about transition is that at 16 years old, we need to start bringing that student into the IEPs, having them actively participate. We need to be starting to give them transitional assessments, personal interest inventories, what we call vocational interest inventories, which are kind of ideas of, what kind of, jobs do you see yourself doing? Also, the vocational skills, which are what skills do you actually have that would match what careers? So, and vice versa. So that's when we're starting to look at that. Now, IDEA says the age of 16 is where we have to start doing that. But in Florida, planning can begin when the student turns age 14. So that is when they're actually coming to the meetings. And we even start earlier than that now. At the age of 12 in the state of Florida, we start looking at those pre-ETs. The pre-ETs are the pre-employment and technical skills. And we start looking at what that child needs, not just educationally, but to thrive in that next environment. So that's why I was trying to explain about IDEA and the way that the states work. So the state of Florida could never decide to say that we're going to start doing transition at 17 because IDEA says no, it has to be started at 16. However, Florida can be more proactive. We found that it's more beneficial to start earlier. And yes, kids don't know what they want to be necessarily at 12, but we start looking realistically at what they're going to need coming up. And so that by the time 18 to 22 comes, we can say that we have been working on this for a while. And there's a lot of room that if you pick a certain path or whatever, there's always ways to come back around and accommodate where that child is now. So it's all for that benefit of that student starting early. So why start earlier? Well, you're going to need time for all of the planning and accessing all of the different support services that you're going to need in the future. The school needs a statement of intent to pursue a standard high school diploma. And then there's preparation needed for the student to graduate with that standard diploma. So we know that all students in the state of Florida now graduate with one standard diploma, whether they're an ESE student, whether they are, advanced, whether they anything in between, one standard diploma. So what we have changed, of course, is that there's a lot of different pathways to that diploma. So we also need to have consideration for, developing self-determination in that child so that they can actively participate in the IEP meetings. And that's really important because who knows better than the student what is actually occurring within themselves and within the context of their disability in the classroom settings? And who knows better than them what they need, what parts of the day they're enjoying, what parts are hard. The kids themselves can be furnishing a lot of this information. And self advocacy, because we need them to be able to understand what their disability is, how it's impacting them, how to ask for help, to not be, embarrassed by talking about it. This becomes really important if you are thinking about going to post-secondary education, because our kiddos' IDEA is going to drop them at either 18 or 22 when they're done with the public school system. However, if they have any of those accommodations, those can follow them right into college under Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. But it's not guaranteed. There's no need for the college to identify these students. They have to self-present and they have to advocate and say what they need, what they were getting previously, submit their IEPs, and be willing to ask for the help that they need. So, there is a lot of new interagency linkages that are going to come in. There is a lot of time that's needed to plan and making sure that they can get these individuals into the meetings. You know, Early and long range planning are critical, for some post school programs, that, have, wait lists. That's a big thing. So we want to be thinking ahead of time. uh, I know from experience, my child is just turned 25, and I'm a very knowledgeable person. I like to think, as a parent and a former ESC teacher and an advocate, but even I was taken for a loop when everything's just flipped on its head. You finally got things coasting, things are good. And now everything has changed. Can't, have the same doctors, the same therapists, insurance changes, life changes. I mean, it can really throw you for a loop. So having this extra time is really, really, really beneficial. So, transition assessments. So we kind of touched on this earlier. IDEA, or the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act of 2004, requires that appropriate measurable post-secondary goals be age appropriate and based on appropriate transition assessments that are related to training and education, employment, and when appropriate, again, those independent living skills. So don't be afraid to put goals on an IEP that are not just solely academic. If it's something that that your child struggles with and will need help with going outside of the school system, then that's something that we can put on that IEP. So, it doesn't change. We still have all the same domains on the IEP, as the transitional IEP. So think of all of the domains. Academic is just one. um, so think of motor skills, gross motor skills, behavior issues, social, issues, communication issues, any of those things, certainly, independent functioning. We're talking about, being able to button your stuff and zip things yourself, and, independently toilet, and whatever the case may be. So for, there's varying disabilities, and sometimes these needs get smaller as the kids get older, and sometimes they remain the same. So we need to be addressing those needs, though, on the IEP. That's why there are all of those domains. So be thinking, what do they need to keep working on? Because what do you want to have them to have hopefully mastered or be as good as they could be with when they're finally out of this environment? So the goals of the transition assessments is, of course, we want to be doing supported decision making. And that means that the individual with the disability is at the helm. They're the ones making the decisions. Now, it's our jobs as, parents and teachers and people on the IEP team to be giving them all of the information to be making the best informed decisions. We want them to be taking charge of the transition process. We don't want this to be something where we're deciding things for them. And we need them, and we also ourselves need to understand the skills that are going to be needed for that post-school environment. So, community participation assessments, career cluster interest inventories. We kind of touched on this a little bit. It's we want to be thinking not just academics. Are they going to college? We could be thinking, there's all of these wonderful career and technical education paths where they could be graduating with a field certification. We need to be thinking, okay, if they're going to be going into a residential placement or an adult day training facility, what are some behaviors that we need to tackle? What are some independent living skills that they would like to work on, by the time they're in the next setting? So we want to also think about, and not a lot of people talk about this, but community. We want that individual that once they're not going to school every day, to make sure that they understand how to access services in the community. And we want to have those, career and vocational skill inventories, but we also want to have those personal interest inventories because we want their jobs to be suited to them, but we want to also get ideas on how do we keep them integrated in a community once the school is done. So there will be transition sections of the IEP. It's just another section that will be gone through like all of the other portions. So we have the present levels of academic and functional performance. So these are going to be the transition assessments. So that's what this is also going to be added to the present levels of academic and functional performance. That's that first part of the IEP where we're talking about their strengths, their needs, their preferences, and also any assessments and, any classroom assessments, whether it's STAR or whatever, that they're using to come up with the needs of their strengths and the areas of need. Um, so these goals for the transition services must be based on the present levels of performance and age appropriate transition assessments. We're not supposed to be guessing here. So there are proper protocols that are written into the IDEA. So the course of study lists classes, experience, activities that are needed for that child in high school to prepare for whatever those post-secondary goals are for that child. It has to be directly related to their post-secondary goals, be meaningful in their future, motivate the student to complete their education, and to support their post-school outcomes. So, if we're talking about courses of study, paying attention to requirements of colleges, career techs, or other specific jobs. And like I said earlier, there's all these career and technical education programs that they can do while in school. There are 22 programs in the state of Florida alone that have major accommodations for students with profound cognitive disabilities. So, get starting earlier and thinking about this also gives you a chance to really access all of the different options out there. So, what is the difference between a post-secondary and an annual goal? So, we're going to do some examples. After high school, John will complete training as an RN at PJC, then pursue a job as a nurse. Okay, so that's our goal. Given computer-assisted instruction on rights and responsibilities as defined by the Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Law, John will identify who at the college he must contact for services, who he must provide his information to, what accommodations he will need, and what to do if his needs are not being met with 100% accuracy by the end of the school year. So, is that a post-secondary goal or is that an annual goal? It is an annual goal. So this is so the big post-secondary goal is that he will complete training as an RN. Now, even if that becomes realistic as he gets closer to that time, or he changes his mind or continues with it, that is the post-secondary goal that he has identified. He wants to be training, he wants to go to school. So the annual goal to support that is he needs to understand, which I also touched on before, the Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, where he can go to the college and say, here's my IEP, I need these accommodations. So that's going to help him with his post-secondary goal of being able to go and complete training as an RN at Page AC. So here is another one. So what is the difference between a post-secondary and an annual goal? After high school, Brenda will attend Career Tech for childcare. Upon completion of coursework, she will work for Early Rise Child Care Center. So Brenda's, is that a post-secondary or is that an annual? That is a post-secondary because that's what she wants to do. So think of the post-secondary bigger picture, what we're going to do. So Brenda wants to attend the Career Tech for childcare, and she even has a place where she wants to work. So that's the big picture goal. So Brad will learn and describe 5 accommodations he needs in the general education setting and why he needs them with 100% accuracy. Well, we don't know what his post-secondary goal is, but that is an annual goal. He is learning his accommodations, and he is learning to self-advocate and to self, describe his needs, which is something he's going to need wherever he goes, which we don't know because there's no post-secondary goal for that one. So the slide on this one is a little funky, but yes, post-secondary goal, annual goal. Annual goals need to include the condition, behavior, criteria, and the time. So think about this acronym always: SMART, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, timed. So, and it has to have that time frame. So what do I need to learn now to live where I want? What do I need to learn now to have the career I want? What do I need to learn now to have the life that I want to have? So that's the post-secondary goals are the what I want to have. And these are our annual goals that are building us up every year. Every year we're identifying more things, and they're mastering more things. So it's an ever evolving and dynamic list, as the IEP should be from year to year. But these are the annual goals that are going to support that. So the condition is the application or the skills or the knowledge that is needed. The behavior identifies whatever the performance that is being monitored. The criterion is how much, how often, and what standards that we're looking for mastery. And then the time frame is specified and the amount of time that we want to see that. So that might be done as an annual goal. It might be an annual goal that's broken up into different benchmarks. So there's different ways to go about that, but we always want to have time frames. We don't want to just leave our goals, whether they're transitional goals or regular IEP goals. We don't want to leave those just kind of out flapping in the wind. We want to know how we're tracking growth and mastery and how often we're doing that. Vocational educational information. So there is so many options out there. So, please do the research. The Project 10 is another nonprofit, and they are amazing. 10 is an acronym for Transitional Education Network, and they are the absolute gurus in Florida with transition. We, of course, would be willing to help you out with that. Like I said, I just went through that personally with my daughter. I used to teach adults with disabilities, and I used to teach teenagers getting ready for the transitions. So, um, it's nice to deal with people who have been through it. So give us a call if you need to. But just a quick run through of some of the information out there. The Department of Vocational Rehabilitation is amazing. So there's an income component for students until they are 18. But if they can't do that from 16 to 18, please go back to them and plug in ASAP. They are an amazing resource that doesn't cost anything to the families or individuals that are using it. And it does those career and interest and skill inventories. It will pay for job training skills. It'll pay for programs that are vocationally based. It pays for, career tech programs, work adjustments, work studies. It helps put people in supported employments. It helps provide high school vocational ed classes. So there's a lot of resources to be used there. And this is just an example of their application. This is the referral, rehabworks.org, or you can just Google vocational rehabilitation, or honestly, VR Florida. They again are an amazing, amazing resource. So touching on the transfer of rights. So moving forward part, well, prior to the student's 18th birthday, we have to notify the individual and the parents that on the 18th birthday, regardless of their, abilities or functionality or cognitive abilities or whatever, it doesn't matter. Their rights will be given to them just like every other American. So you will need to seek legal advice if your child is going to need you to keep making decisions for them or assisting them. We want to see that supported decision making where we're watching out and we're giving them all of the ideas and opportunities, and they're deciding. So if they're going to need that help and that supported decision making, thinking of guardianship ahead of time. It takes a while to get an attorney. It costs money. It's a lot. So you need to be thinking about that. I would honestly say even before 17, because it can take up to a year in the mire, and your child's birthday turns 18. And if they have a medical issue, they're not going to let you sign for them. And if they're not able to understand and competently sign, they're not going to let the child sign either. So it can be a pickle. I experienced this personally with my daughter's wisdom teeth. So please, please heed my warnings and take care of this ahead of time. Post-secondary goals. So again, these are the big pictures. Where do I want to live, learn, work, and participate in the community after high school? So students of transition age, they have to have that further education and employment. They have to have the annual goals that support it. They have to have the transition assessments that support it. And they have to know that independent living is optional, no matter what the level of their disability. I used to teach adults with disabilities, and the Agency for Persons with Disabilities, in conjunction with the Social Security Department, allows individuals with disabilities to live out in the community. So that is an option. Students get to have input and write goals based on answers to the questions: where do I want to live? Where do I want to work? Where do I want to learn? Where do I want to play? So this is the end of our presentation. A little bit more information about us. We are the Family Network on Disabilities. I am with Poppin, Parents Offering Parents Information and Networking. We are the Panhandle region, And shout out to my Panhandle people. I hope everybody got through Debbie okay. Um, so other regions are the Parent Support Network that are the west side of the state, the Parent Education Network that is the east side of the state. And we also have the Family Star, which is our sister program that helps parents. She covers the entire state and helps parents who have children who have chronic health needs or mental health needs. So there's some crossover, whereas POPN, PSN, and PEN are primarily disability related. Family Star are the ones that work with the more health related issues. They provide the same resources and supports, though. So we are everywhere. If you need us, you can find us. We are on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok. And our website is just a glut of amazing free downloadable resources. We have social stories, we have one pagers, we have parent tip books, we have all kinds of resources. Please go and check that out. We've broken them down. We understand that you're not doctors, lawyers, or teachers out there. We break that stuff down so that it's simple to understand and to use. So please check it out. You can reach us the old-fashioned way, 1-800-825-5736. And then on my screen, I have that little purple box, and that is my QR code to reach out to me personally. If you are in the Panhandle, feel free. If you are elsewhere and somehow catching this, then we could happily refer you to either PSN or PEN. Thank you so much for your time again. I wish everyone in the Panhandle well, especially all of our families in Taylor, Madison, Leon, and Marion counties. Take care and thank you for your time. Bye.